Hello, welcome to the Herald's Horn. On this episode, Dan, Emma, and myself talk about Innistrad Remastered Aetherdrift, and also the new news that Secret Lairs are coming to your very own local game store. It's a little bit of a shorter first half of the episode this week because, well, I'm sick, Emma is starting to get sick, and, well, Dan was in full health, but I'm sure they were very busy and had a lot of stuff to get done. Before we continue, very important business. I need to, for the first time ever, shout out one of our first chair tier patrons, Bald Rald Jerry. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you for being our first ever first chair level patron. I appreciate it a lot. After the break, I'm joined by Zeb, playing with Power member, my very good long-term friend, and of course, Commander Cube designer extraordinaire. We talk about making games that you love your own, whether that be tweaking board game designs, messing around with video games, randomizers, mods, etc., or even making your own custom Magic sets. That's right, Wizard friends. I'm sorry if you are listening out there. If you work at Wizards of the Coast and you are listening, there's a lot of discussion on the back half of this episode about custom card design and some specifics about Zeb's custom set that he has designed by himself. So, however, it is a great interview. I'm sure you are going to love it. Speaking of the Patreon, like I always say, if you enjoy the show, I would love it if you considered supporting us over there. For as little as $5 a month, you can get into the Discord. There's some exclusive content. It's a great time. I would love it. You know, this is a Patreon plug. You know how this works. I'll send you a sticker in the mail. How about that? I also wanted to say really quickly, the Herald's Horn now has a Substack as well, where I am working on making a bi-weekly newsletter, kind of covering some of the same stuff that is going on here on the podcast that we talk about, but also some other stuff as well. We already have one guest contributor essay. I would love it if there was more guest contributions over there as well. You can find a link to it in the podcast description, all that good stuff. Consider subscribing. It would mean a whole lot to me as I launch yet another creative project for me to handle in my day-to-day life. Without any other further ado, let's get into episode number 32. Hello! It's time for the Herald's Horn, part of the One Shot Network. My name is Cal Jones, and today I am joined by the wonderful Emma. Say hello, Emma.
Hi, Emma.
It's been a minute. You've been so busy. It's been a minute since you've been on the show. It's great to have you back.
Thanks. I have been busy. I am also now falling sick, so great timing for that. But yeah, it's good to be back.
Yep, Emma is sick. Emma's falling sick. I am currently sick. So this is fair warning. This is going to be, I think, a little bit of a shorter.
Dan is also sick,
show.
But not in an illness sense. Right.
I was going to say, like, we've done nothing but talk about you two feeling sick since we started this recording, and now, honestly, my throat feels scratchy. Like, I know it's psychological, but...
I am also joined by Dan. Say how sick you are, Dan.
I am so sick that Young Thug called me a cool young man.
Run the theme song. And welcome back. As always, we're going to jump straight into the news. We only have one little news segment this week. Secret Lairs are coming to local game stores. In a post over on the mothership on January 13th, so on Monday, Blake Rasmussen posted, a Secret Lair test is coming to your local WPN game store. He kind of got into some of the background, which we've discussed a lot in the past on the show. Mechanically unique Secret Lairs, like the Marvel Secret Lairs, a lot of the Universes Beyond stuff. Historically, they have reprinted those through like the Universes Within series of cards, which they put on the list in Set Boosters. Set Boosters no longer exists. The list no longer exists. So Wizards of the Coast has been trying to find some kind of solution to raise the supply of these mechanically unique cards that are only released once through Secret Lair. And so what they're doing is they are going to make a, quote, limited quantity, end quote, of non-foil versions of mechanically unique Secret Lairs available to WPN stores. They posit, they say, They're the exact same non-foil drops that you could buy on MagicSecretLair.com just from the person who runs your Friday Night Magic. It's a bit of a test, but one we're excited about. Finding the best ways to get mechanically unique drops into the hands of players who want them is something that's important to us, and we're excited to try this new approach. So Secret Lairs, always a continually evolving topic. They're always changing something about how they're trying to fix the own problems that it seems they're making with their own decisions. I could think of a great way for them to make mechanically unique Secret Lairs more available.
Is it print to order?
Make them print to demand. Oh, Emma, did you just have the same idea as me?
Yeah, I just said, is it print to order? This really cool thing that. So while print to order is like the thing that people want, you got to remember when print to order was a thing, people were complaining they couldn't get the cards. So
yeah,
it
I was
feels
going to
like
say, immediately run into that wall.
Yeah. It took months to get your cards.
Yeah, you don't want to pay like $100 for Secret Lair cards and wait 6 months for them to arrive. The whole point, we live in a culture where everything is instantaneous. Thanks Amazon for creating that culture. So even if they did the print to order thing, people are going to complain. If Wizards don't do the print to order and do limited drops, people are going to complain. So it's it feels like a lose-lose situation for Wizards, no matter which way you splice it. Just because Wizards isn't set up to do this because they're printing other stuff. They have, logistically, it's just very hard to do.
So, with us now, I think pretty much all having to accept that print to order is not coming back to Secret Lairs unless something drastic happens. I think this is an interesting change. I am all for there being more of these cards out there that exists, and I am also all for Wizards doing more to help out WPN stores. Giving these WPN stores more cool exclusive products that they can have access to incentivize people shopping there rather than Amazon or Walmart or what have you, where you may be able to get cards technically cheaper or whatever. I think that anything you can do to help out the stores is a good thing. But Dan, how do you feel about this change? I kind of view it positively. Dan, how do you feel about it?
It seems like something that is destined to fail. It seems like at a very base level, it would seem like they are, this is sort of like an attempt to maybe shift some of the blame of not being able to pick up these cards from Wizards onto your WPN store, wherever it happens to be, which is, of course, that's not their inspiration for wanting to do this. I think that this is sort of an inevitable experiment that they should try in this. I think it is destined to fail, but I think that this is something that's if it worked, it would be very simple. So this is something that's worth trying out. But it does run into so many problems so quickly. And I think one of the first and most obvious is, what is this limited supply? What does it look like? How many cards is that? If this is 10 sets of these non-foil things, it's basically nothing. Do you as the store owner now put them up for MSRP and just sell them to the first 10 people who walk into your door? Do you mark them up so that you can make the most money out of them to support your own store? Do you just hold them aside and give them to your best customers? In which case that I don't know that really helps anyone out in particular any more than anything else, it's a really difficult situation, I think, to parse out exactly how stores should deal with these limited quantities. It's a good idea, I think, in essence, but I think in practice, I am very skeptical at it working out in the long term. And another thing is that this is very different in America as opposed to other countries around the world, where you don't have a WPN store everywhere around the block. And the same is true in terms of me living in Philadelphia as opposed to someone living in the middle of I don't know, Nebraska or something like that. There's just there are far fewer WPN stores everywhere to service the people who actually want these cards.
Also, this isn't the first time Wizards have done this, because they did it with the Secret Lair fetch lands that was sold through WPN stores.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was one of the first Secret Lair big drops. And this is how long ago we're talking, because there's been so many secret layers since. But yeah, like, stores got exclusive, buy these 5 fancy fetch lands in a really ridiculously big box. And
the big box killed me.
It was like a suitcase. It was so big.
I've been to some stores in the UK. I've seen some of the stores just still have them out for sale. Nobody's bought them. Granted,
because they're so
cards,
expensive.
That also, the ones that Wizards are doing for this trial are the D&D movie Secret Lair cards. They're in Magic, but they're also in D&D because the Hasbro own, like, it's the same IP basically. And a lot of those cards are actually quite expensive because they're really good in Commander. So there is going to be interest for these cards, but as Dan rightly says, how is the store going to distribute them? Will there be prizes for events? Are they just going to break them up and put them on eBay? Like, are they just going to buy a couple themselves and forget about it? It's a difficult thing to do. It's like, I get Wizards' intention, and it sounds like they're trying to fix it, which is, credit to them. It's just, as Dan says, it's probably going to fail. But it's also important to give feedback on this stuff because it is a test. And if you don't give feedback, it's not going to get better.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And I think, like, if you could rely on everyone to be a nice, honest human being who wants the equal amount for everyone, this would work perfectly. But of course, people are flawed. People have needs. And when you hand someone a few $100 bills, like, some people gotta feed themselves and their families and do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a very difficult situation.
Yeah, and I do also wonder, I doubt they're going to just, like, give these to the WPN stores. I assume the WPN stores will have to buy them, so that they're already, like, Wizards of the Coast has just given stuff to WPN stores before, like some funky secret layer drops and that kind of stuff. But I know, like, to your point, Dan, I will say, I think this is a positive change in that it is probably better than nothing. However, I think like how many are we doing here? If each store just gets like 10, that probably just creates so many bad incentives such that, like, actually this is not a positive change at all.
Yeah, when I first said 10, I was like, oh, does that seem like a really unrealistic number? But if I think of, like, my WPN in New Hampshire where I went to, like, if they gave them 100, it would have been way too many. That would have been, like, more than the amount of customers who came into that store. Like, it probably wouldn't be, honestly, that much more than 10, I would imagine. Although I still think they separate, like, WPNs into different, like, tiers, right? In terms of, like,
there's
how
WPN
much product you can allocate.
WPN Premium.
Yeah.
There's 2 tiers. So, I don't know, maybe they can buy up to X amount. Like, WPN stores will be able to buy up to X amount, and WPN Premium stores will be able to buy up to X amount. But it's fun to have some conjecture about. I'm sure we'll know some more specifics or whatnot when it comes down to it. When they make the first one available, I'll go down to my local my preferred LGS. I almost said local LGS. That's a great way to get shot in the comments. Go down to my local game store that I prefer, and I'll be, Steve, tell me how it works, Steve, and then I'll have to legally do it because I asked him.
Yep.
And then I can take that excellent journalistic reporting and I can bring it to you, the Herald's Horn listener.
Wow, we got some man on the street action now. This podcast is
some
going
journalism.
places.
I've been meaning to have Steve on the show. Steve is someone I'd like to interview. Just have a nice everyman mid-sized game store on the owner on the pod. What's not to like?
You know what? I think the 3 of us should go get our LGS owners to come on the show and they can interview each other.
Ooh, that's good.
Or they can just do their own episode of the show.
Interview each other.
Yeah,
Perfect.
A little roundtable discussion. I don't know. It doesn't have to be about Magic.
True. Well, I guess we'll see what happens here. I think, like, the mechanically unique secret layers are always going to be a problem. In my mind, it feels possible for them to continue doing universes within stuff, but use the special guest slot. That's like the available technology right now, I guess, is the special guest slot, but the special guest slot is used for so many other things already. So it's like, I don't know.
It's also the problem with special guests, sorry, Dan, is that these cards also have to influence limited to some capacity.
Oh,
because,
so true. Yeah.
Sure, they're fairly rare in like play boosters, but I imagine Wizards also put these reprints into sets that are not only thematic to the set they're in, but they actually are seeing play in, you know, they're good for the limited and format. I imagine having like Iron Man in Aetherdrift, for example, is going to be a bit too good because it's like an artifact set, for example. That would cause some tension.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like the only real solution is to make them bad and make them standard legal and just have them like in the rare slot, like in an universe form. I don't know how else you would like realistically like supply the level of demand that there is out there for just the average Magic card.
I guess there's also always some kind of world where they not bring back the list or whatever, but I don't know. Everything about collector boosters specifically is like already so fake and made up. Put them in.
That's not true. They're special. They dug those out of the core of the earth.
Make a special slot in a collector booster where you can get whatever in-universe Iron Man looks like or whatever, you know? Or
that's fair, because like opening up a collector booster, I haven't done it in a long time. But
what?
I was saying opening up a collector booster, I haven't done it in a while, but like just the amount of like foil commons that you get, nobody cares about those foil commons. It is just filler. Yeah, just throw a Secret Lair card in there.
Well, I think that's all we have to say about the Secret Lairs coming to local game stores, unless Emma has any more unique insight for us.
Not really. I mean, I'm looking forward to see how this plays out. I'm looking forward to the people on Reddit getting extremely angry, because that's what people on Reddit do. But just to stress that I'm glad that Wizards are actually acknowledging this as a problem and we're trying to find a way to fix it. They're probably going to go through a few more different like concepts before they settle on one. So be patient, I guess, which is very hard right now because nobody's patient.
Yeah, it's like we have this test now, and I imagine they'll probably try it for like 2 or 3 mechanically unique Secret Lair drops, which could very well be a period of 6 to 9 months. You know, so this may be
there
the
is
thing
a backlog,
we're doing for the.
To be fair,
yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, I wonder if this does include like the older stuff that we haven't gotten the chance to. They didn't get the chance to universe within. I guess we'll see. But that is all we have for the news this week. So we are going to move on to the product watch.
Product watch.
I missed that.
What?
I missed this.
I'll just send you an MP3 of that.
Thank you.
Emma, this is what you've been missing out on.
I'll set it as my alarm in the morning.
I was going to say, like, you're in the grocery store and your phone starts ringing.
Product watch. Product watch.
Is that the Herald Sword?
Wait, what? Oh, too funny.
The Product Watch is presented by Card Conduit, the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. After all, you need to clear out space for all the new cards you'll get from these new sets. Brought to you by the beloved team behind Card Hoarder, Card Conduit does the hard work of getting you the best buy list prices available for your cards. All you have to do is send them one package, taking advantage of your selection of their 3 services. I use the sorted service, which has you collate and enter cards ahead of time in return for the lowest fees. Don't worry, you could just send them a huge box of random unsorted cards too, and they'll figure it out. I've used Card Conduit myself 5 different times to thin my collection, and I've had exclusively great experiences. Use code HORN at checkout or use the link in the podcast description to get 10% off your fees and help support the show. Welcome to the Product Watch, the part of the show where we talk about all the Magic the Gathering products that are coming soon or are out now or will be coming months down the pipeline. We haven't talked about that in a while, but Innistrad Remastered previews, they're complete. They're here. We know everything that is going to be in the set. For those of you who don't know, just going to run it again really quick. Innistrad Remastered is a booster set release that is coming out on January 24th, 2025. So in just a few days now. It includes a range of treatments, retro frames, borderless cards, and even 10 movie poster cards. All of the cards within the set, except for a couple exceptions, are cards drawn directly from the 7 different Innistrad sets that we have had. But they also put in a couple different cards that they themed to be like on Innistrad. Like there's a Hermit Druid and there's
a Mass Hysteria with werewolves.
There's a
on
Mass Hysteria. Yeah, there's an Into the Breach. That kind of
Edgar Markov, because he's Commander 2017 technically, not even Innistrad.
An Innistrad character. But the whole set is here. I looked through it. I looked through the whole thing, and I said, "Wow, that's a whole bunch of Innistrad cards." One reprint I noticed that is pretty nice. We're getting I don't remember what these lands are called, but Emma, in my mind I call them like the slow lands. They enter the battlefield. Is that
right? So that's what people call them. I like to call them last lands because they're the opposite of fast lands.
Sure. But this is the cycle of lands from Crimson Vow and Midnight Hunt that enter the battlefield tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. So yes, like Emma said, they're the opposite.
They are very good for Commander though. They're basically staples in Commander.
Yes, these are cards that I have wanted to get my hands on for Commander, but they have commanded a sneakily high price.
I know they're not cheap enough to be in my budget decks, which is unfortunate, but hopefully another reprint will do it.
But yeah, getting this land cycle reprinted is nice because, like we just said, they're very nice for Commander. Nice to have an ETB untapped potentially dual available for Commander decks, especially because in a lot of Commander decks, you'll have no problem getting to 3 lands or whatever, right? So these are for Commander, I guess, especially probably a lot better than like the fast lands. I'm a big fast lands enjoyer. I love playing the fast lands, but I would like to play these even more. So getting these reprinted is nice. Obviously, an Edgar Markov reprint is really nice. He has commanded a $1 billion price point for a very long time.
I think you just said $1 trillion, actually.
Oh, it's more of $1 trillion price point? Is that what?
Yeah, that Judge promo was not cheap, you know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I forgot that was the only reprint up until this point.
Yeah, it's a choice.
So, actually, no, I'm not looking forward to the Edgar Markov reprint because this means that so many people out there are going to buy their little Innistrad Remaster packs and they're going to crack open an Edgar Markov and they're going to go, I have a cool and unique idea. I'm going to make an Edgar Markov Commander deck.
I'm already about to face Dylan from Play to Win playing casual, and I know he's going to play that deck next week, and it's going to be that forever.
I think that's like the drawback of having a reprint is something like Edgar Markov. Like the reason people didn't play it much is just because they couldn't afford to play it. And now it's probably going to be like half the price. It's still going to be expensive, but it's going to be much cheaper than...
willing to spend $40 or $50 though.
Right. So it's expensive still, but it's more accessible than it was before. So more people are going to want to play it, and more people are going to be like, man, I really hate Edgar Markov, because they've never played against it, because people haven't been able to,
buy it. That's true. This is going to be a whole new generation for him. I forgot this originally came out in 2017, which is, quite a few years at this point.
And that's before a lot of Magic players' times. That's...
and we've had an Innistrad set then, full of vampires. We've had, the deck's really good.
The best thing about that deck is you just need draft chaff. Like, just any vampire that costs 1 to 2 mana is the best thing you've ever seen.
We were joking about $1 billion and $1 trillion price point. For reference, before it became known TM that Edgar Markov was going to be an Innistrad Remastered, this card over the last year was fluctuating in the $90 to $100 range.
Even the oversized card demands $20-$30. It's crazy.
Yep.
There was going to some of the finance folks were slowly buying them out because they didn't think it would get reprinted in Innistrad Remastered, and then it did. So,
that's an interesting bet to make, but good on you.
Yeah, and looking at some of the pre-sale pricing on TCGplayer.com, sponsored, ding, not sponsored, ding. It looks like most of the versions are pre-selling $75 to $90. The normal non-fancy version from Remastered, there's all of 4 listings that are selling at $70-ish. That obviously pre-sale prices, especially on known commodity cards, almost always come down after sets actually release.
And Edgar's got 4 different printings, including the poster one in this set. So
usually there's a race to the bottom on release day to sell stuff, and sure, everyone's going to want to buy Edgar Markov, so it does mean you can probably charge a little higher just based on commander demand, but I expect it to be lower than the current pre-sale price, and that applies to most cards.
Yeah, I would certainly think so.
Emma, I wanted to ask you this. Last week on the show, Lexi and Dan and I talked for a pretty decent little bit of time how we were feeling about like remastered sets in general, but kind of especially how we felt about Innistrad Remastered. I'm kind of tired of the product line. Innistrad Remastered, for whatever reason, just really isn't doing it for me, even though like several of the Innistrad sets happen to me like some of my favorite sets of all time and have some of my favorite cards of all time. For whatever reason, seeing them all together in one set isn't really doing it for me. I can't really like tack down why, but how are you feeling about Innistrad Remastered, Emma?
So hello, dog. So I'm like, might be a take. I'm not the biggest fan of Innistrad. I think the environment has just been overdone, and this was prior to like Innistrad being printed. Granted, I wasn't around for original Innistrad, but I understand it's like a well-loved set. There was a lot of cool cards. You had Lineal of the Veil, you had Snapcaster Mage, and so forth. Innistrad Remastered doesn't hit it for me because I'm not the biggest Innistrad fan. But the coolest thing about remaster sets that I don't think people realize is you can literally ignore it, which is one of the very few Magic sets you can do now. So you can be like, oh, it's a reprint set, great. I'll forget about it. Aetherdrift is soon. I'd rather focus on Aetherdrift. A lot of the time people complain about Magic sets because they have to pay attention to every set, and it's like Innistrad, the remaster sets are literally the opposite of that. You could just ignore it and be fine. Also, from a work standpoint, I kind of like them because they are these small-scale sets, and it kind of warms me up into the intense release schedule that's going to be for the next 8 months. So it's like, cool, here's a small set just to warm up again after the holidays, after when things have settled down. So yeah, like I'm glad they exist because reprints are cool. It helps add circulation to things. Edgar Markov being a really good example that we talked about. But you can literally ignore it unless you're someone in the creator space, perhaps sponsored by Wizards to produce content for it. You can literally ignore it and just move on.
Yeah, that's true. I guess they take up a lot more brain space, for me than they do for the average person or whatever, because I have to come on a podcast for 3 weeks in a row and be like, so, Innistrad Remastered.
Yeah, Innistrad Remaster sets for the average Magic consumer, so your person who plays Commander weekly, so forth, they will probably go through the set once going, oh cool, there's a reprint of Cryptolith, right? That card's like $15 now. I will pick up a reprint or pick up a copy post-release because I want it for my Reese the Redeemed Commander deck, for example.
Yeah.
And I have a shopping list ready to go for all the retro frame cards I want because I would love to have them for my Pauper collection. So I will spend $50 on picking up commons and uncommons, and I'll be done.
Favorite reprint besides Thraben?
Oh, my favorite reprint, Delver Secrets. The retro frame is really nice.
Yeah, the retro frame
I haven't
really
seen
sick.
it yet. I'll have to look it up.
It's one of the few retro frames that actually looks like it should be in retro frame.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Classic. I think actually like low-key, I guess a lot of people's interaction with this set, especially if they're like less engaged or whatever, is then just like, oh, interesting. Cryptolith is like an $8 card now? I didn't know that. Okay, I'll buy one. Or, oh, cool, there's a sick new crazy border blood artist. I'll buy that. I'll pick that up for my commander deck or whatever. Yeah. I guess they're all fine and good. So Innistrad Remastered. Remastered, it's fine.
I'm thankful they exist. Reprints are pretty important. It also allows Wizards to not put these in actual standard sets where they might be too good, or in Commander product that might not influence the circulation of cards to lower the price. But as a consumer of Magic, you can literally forget these, which is what people have been begging for years. They can actually forget these. So, like, you've got one set out of 7 this year to do that. And I think that's fine.
Yeah, definitely.
Considering.
Very measured take from Emma, as per usual.
Yeah, as per usual. We've got the 2 take masters, and we have our even keel.
Well, I love that the news section was supposed to be our big, we're going to butt heads and we're going to do some disagreeing, and we're all like, interesting point.
That's what I've been told repeatedly, like on Twitter, whenever talking about Magic. It's like, Emma, you're too well reasoned, which is their way of saying you're right, but I don't like that you're right.
Well, it's easy to be right when your usual take on things is like, well, some things are some way and some things are a different way. Like, no, I don't think any of the three of us are ever really like so prescriptivist that we need to be like told to calm down.
But no, like I imagine the limited format for this is going to be great. You don't have Butcher's Cleave and Invisible Stalker this time around, so it's immediately better than the original Innistrad sets. So
don't talk about my boy Invisible Stalker. He rules.
Not with a Butcher's Cleaver, he doesn't. Like, let's be honest.
That's him with the cleaver.
So, Innistrad Remastered, it'll be releasing on January 24th, and then it'll be out. And then maybe you will finally be able to build the Edgar Markov deck of your dreams. Aetherdrift season is almost upon us. We are already getting the story. Have either of you, the two of you, read it at all? I have not.
I skimmed it a bit, and I just skimmed it a bit. Didn't really get too far into it. It's not really my kind of plane, so I don't know.
I'm not a big Magic lore person, so I tend to skip them. Unless there's card previews, and then I have to care.
Yeah, definitely. Mark Rosewater also released his classic teaser full of funky stuff that would be in the set. There was a bunch of different interesting ones, like New Lotus and
Gaia's Cradle for Goblins.
Engines. What?
Gaia's Cradle for Goblins, something that taps for red for each goblin you control.
Yep. 1313 vehicle with crew 2 that costs 1 mana to cast was the thing that stuck out to me. Obviously, there's got to be some other catch there, I would imagine, but it should be funny to see what it is, see what it does, see what's going on there. But previews proper start on January 20th, 2025. So by next episode or so, we will have, I'm sure, plenty of Aetherdrift to talk about. But for now, it's just a little bit of trickling information out there.
Got the kitty car?
Yeah, we've seen some pictures of cars, but
there's the Gearhulk too that they premiered a little while ago.
Yeah, the Gearhulk. So of all of the stuff in Aetherdrift, they've shown off a little bit of stuff, but the thing they showed off that I'm most interested in is the multicolor Gearhulk cycle. That's
going to be a lot of fun, I think.
I'm a Gearhulk boy through and through, born and bred. I just want to, that's actually all I want to do in Magic formats. I want a Magic format where I can comfortably register 4X Torrential Gearhulk in every deck that I'd ever play.
You would have loved Pioneer 5 years ago.
Oh, I know. I was real into early Pioneer for exactly that reason. I was like, pulled out my foil Torrential Gearhulks and my foil Spire Bluff Canal playsets, and I was like, let's go. But yeah, really interested in that. But it'll be interesting to see how they approach the tone of this set. A bunch of different factions racing. We've seen some kind of like silly stuff with some of the factions already. It seems a little bit silly. I'm sure it's a
post-revolutionary world too. So like,
yeah, true.
It's a very interesting groundwork that they're laying for this set. Like having it be a sort of like, I just can't stop thinking of whichever Star Wars prequel had the pod racers in them. That's what I think every single time I think about this.
Episode 1, The Phantom
Menace. Is it episode 1? Yeah. Yes, this is pod racing, etc., etc.
The Star Wars PC game around pod racing way back when was very good, on a side note.
I have heard that. I haven't played it.
I like the N64 one. That's what I've played.
I like the PC one just because you could actually customize your pod racer and upgrade it.
Oh, yeah.
And then you go on races. So good.
That's so awesome. Fine. I'll pick it up.
And I'll buy Chibi Robo.
Pog! All right. Well, it's somehow nearly already been 40 minutes when we said, oh, short recording. So I think that's about all we have for today. That is a little short for us, actually. I think that's about all we have for today. Emma, Dan, do you have anything else to leave our listeners with before we go? Let's start with Emma.
Make sure you get your vitamins and make sure to go out for a walk.
Love a walk. Dan?
I'm just going to promote myself, Moderately Anonymous MTG, on all the platforms. Go check out my YouTube channel and listen to the Herald Horn podcast. 5 stars, please.
Thank you so much for listening. We have a great interview coming up. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So now we're technically recording. This is where you say something embarrassing that I use against you later in the interview.
Butts.
And welcome back to the interview side of the show. Today, I am joined by the one, the only, my good friend, the man I got into CDH, the man who has me interested in Commander Cube all the time, the man who joined playing with Power and then I promptly left a week later. It's Zeb. What's up, Zeb?
What is happening, Callahan Jones?
I guess I missed like the in my wedding part, have known each other for nearly a decade part.
Over
whatever.
a decade now.
You know, I think that's all contained within good friend.
That is true. That is true.
Zeb, you being on the podcast, I think is long overdue. Secretly, I've been trying to keep all of my better friends kind of like in my back pocket where I'm just like, oh boy, everything fell through. You know who I can call on? Zeb. So, Zeb, today we are going to be talking about, it's a little bit of an abstract topic, but we do have some specific things within that I know you want to talk about, and I'm sure I have some things to pick your brain about or ask you about as well. And that is making your favorite games yours. Obviously, where we're going to start is Magic the Gathering, but we have some other games we could talk about as well. Zeb, when you say making your games yours, what do you mean by that? Let's define that for the audience. Kind of what do we mean?
Everyone loves, their games, or hobbies even. And you'll, like, a lot of the time you'll find yourself going, man, I really love this aspect of this game. I love all of this stuff. I kind of wish that this was a little bit different, though, a little bit more the way that I want it to be, right? A great example is a house rule, right? You play a game of Commander, and I don't know, you decide that you want your commander to be like a Dan deck, and you play Eluge as your commander, and you have a bunch of Dan Dans.
Who would have done this? I don't know.
Who would ever do that?
Exactly.
That's a prime example, is the house rule. It is going, we like this game at its core, or hobby at its core. We're going to change something about it to make it play more or act more the way that we want it to, kind of put our spin on it.
I think a reason why Commander is so popular, we brushed up about this a lot in my recent interview with Niall Joan Rivers, where we were specifically talking about micro games that she designs and that kind of stuff. Which is like, using existing Magic the Gathering game pieces to create new little games. Dan is an example. Niall's Bat Heist that she did was an example. Her new game, Kate's Cage Fight, is an example. Using existing Magic cards to create new games. We're talking about something a little bit different here. We're talking about that could be an example, I guess, but we're going a bit bigger picture. So, Zeb, like a cube is a great example, right? That we've talked about a lot on the show in the past of a way to make Magic your own. Commander is kind of a microcosm example at its base. You're kind of making your own deck, designing your own cool thing that doesn't have to necessarily meet the goals of winning a game. And with Rule Zero that people like to throw around a lot, it can also, like you just alluded to, you can have a EDH deck with 28 Dans in it, therefore exactly breaking the rules of the Commander for the greater good. But we're Zeb, you've gone a little bit farther in making Magic the Gathering your own. Beyond just a cube. You have a cube, you have designed a lot of Commander decks, and you said, all right, I'm done working inside of the existing Magic the Gathering constraints of card designs that are given to me. You've made your own sets.
I have made my own sets. I have. One of which I have printed multiple times to make new iterations of, and have taken to Magic Cons to not like great acclaim, but everyone that has played it has loved it. I have even at one point had someone tell me that it is the most fun draft format they've ever played in Magic, which was high praise.
It's pretty gratifying, yeah.
I'll tell you. But yeah, so to preface it, at one point I was like asking the question to some random people, like some friends and whatnot, like, hey, if you could have an IP be a Universes Beyond Magic set, what would you pick? right? And people had like some really fun answers. I think this was like right before we knew that Final Fantasy was going to get one, and someone actually did say Final Fantasy. But like mine, for whatever no, I know exactly why it was. It was because Pikmin 4 had just dropped for the Switch, and I had been playing it for like 25 hours straight at that point, and it was like, I want Pikmin. And was talking to someone about stuff like that, and we just like workshopped in like an hour kind of how that would work. And I was like, man, I like that. And so I just immediately got on. I had my laptop with me at the time. I think I was at Gen Con, and just like cracked open Magic Set Editor and just like wrote down some basic rules and was like, okay, cool, I'll come back to that. And then within a week after Gen Con, I had already written, I think, about 200 unique cards for in Magic Set Editor. And outside of a month, I had already had art on everything, had developed the cards, was ready for the first print. And that was like, what, a year and a half ago now? So I've reprinted, redone all of the cards like 3 times now. And now I actually have them all in like Universes Beyond frames, because they've added that to Magic Set Editor and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So that is, definitely. So it's so mine that it's not even just going, I'm just going to take Magic cards and create a cube, which is in a sense a custom set. That is your own set that you're developing, right? I have gone further than that and made my own cards. And I think that is similar to how I feel about Cube, where I believe that Cube is kind of the purest form of someone's expression of their love for the game. Because it almost, like 90% of the time, you're going to be putting your favorite cards.
The game, like, as it exists, is made by Wizards of the Coast.
Yes, as it exists by Wizards of the Coast. That's the purest form. But when you can get even further than that, because a custom set, perhaps, while not legal, obviously, and you can't take it to a tournament, is how a person can express their vision for the game. You can go, here's this mechanic. How would I want this mechanic to exist in Magic the Gathering? How would I want this IP to exist in Magic the Gathering? You can go like, all right, well, I want Link from Legend of Zelda in Magic. How would he look? Like, we don't even have to go a full set. We can just look at one card, right?
Yeah, cards.
People have done that for ages. Have gone, here's this one thing. I would love to see it exist as this in Magic the Gathering, So custom sets are a very fun rabbit hole to fall down into, or even just like custom Magic design. Right. Yeah.
As someone who has been dabbling in it in a little bit, we just heard about your Pikmin set. I've somehow still yet to play it. These things happen. These things happen. I just dodge Zeb at every turn. Zeb says, "Oh, do you want to?" And I go, "No." And I.
Hi, best friend. Oh shit!
I've got a really busy, important appointment in the bathroom. I'm kidding. You have designed your Pikmin set. You've gone through several iterations of it. You kind of just gave us the 1,000-foot view of how it came to be and how quickly it came together. But what was kind of the process? What thought went into it? What kind of steps did you have to go through to make that happen? You're saying you designed it, you developed it, you printed it out. What does that look like for you? I think a lot of us who are more invested in the Magic the Gathering space knows how it looks per se. Especially those of us who a continual joke on the podcast is how many, at least in my mind, is how many episodes of Drive to Work I've listened to compared to the average person. It's not healthy. Right. I know the process of how Magic cards are made, but many people do not. And I assume custom cards might be a little different too. What did that process look like for you? Or what process would you recommend to someone who says, I want to make a custom set right now?
Something that we hear fairly often when we hear the actual employees talking about designing a set is top down versus bottom up. And if I remember this correctly, top down means we develop the mechanics and then we apply the lore or the Vorthos aspect to it. Or is
that's top down, because the top is the art in the name. So it's from the top down, quite literally, and then bottom up is the mechanics and upwards. Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like bottom to top versus top down creation, right? Innistrad was one. I believe that it was top down, or it was like Gothic horror. This is the core of it. Let's develop this for that. And then, so that's where I came from with the Pikmin set. Was all right. Obviously, we're doing Pikmin. How does this come out? How does this feel? And I was workshopping it with a friend that I mentioned for like about an hour or so, and that's where we came up on like, okay, well, armies, right? Because you've got in Pikmin, you have a bunch of these little plant ant looking things that follow you around everywhere. They're different colors, and the different colors do different things. So it's like, okay, well, that's a great start. Armies, okay. And now here's a kind of fun thing where we get into the how we wish to make it our own. Is that I don't particularly like how normal armies in the Magic the Gathering setting they have static power toughness, right? So they'll get the 1/1 counters on them. Oh, the army's bigger. But if every one of those 1/1 counters is meant to represent a unit in the army, a thing that exists in that army, so if you got like a zombie army, each 1/1 counter is a zombie within that army, well, you should be able to kill individuals in that army, not just destroy the whole army or have the whole army destroy you. So what I came up with was, I was like, okay, yeah, so they're going to be Pikmin army that you make, but I'm going to give them all a keyword that is based on magic that has existed but has never been keyworded before. And I call it Phantom, where it's based somewhat off of the old Phantom cards, like Phantom Neshoba, Phantom Flock, where when they would take damage, you prevent that damage and remove a 1/1 counter from them. I went a step further and made it, you prevent that much damage and remove that many 1/1 counters, right? So if you've got a 4/4
Yeah, because it's a quite literal, like, it's just how the mechanic works in the game. Your Pikmin die and you have less of them. Oh, brother.
Yeah, well, how about that, right? And so then I was just like, all right, well, and here's another cool thing that custom Magic creators do very often is, all right, well, how does a mechanic similar to this work in the game system already? And they'll like trawl all of the judge forums, the wiki, read the rule books to like make sure that what they're doing technically can be like worked within the rules of Magic as it is at that time. So I looked through all the army rules, and one that I hit that I really loved was initially when they were going to do the orc armies, they were considering having it be a mass color number in addition to a mass orcs, right? So it's a mass orcs 1 right now for like Bowmaster, right? It was initially going to be a mass black orcs 1 because they're leaving it open for different army colors to be made now, right? But then they just went back on it. But even in that wiki article, like that was talking about how, like, I think it was Morrow and other people were talking about it, they're leaving it open for that. It is not illegal to say amass red orcs 1 or something like that. And you would make a red orc army, not a black army. So I took that and was like, well, I'm just going to have an amass mechanic that makes Pikmin. And so I did amass blue Pikmin 1. And
yeah, and that does allow you to have different armies if you do that consideration, because like I think something that people don't kind of notice right now about how the current amass rules work or whatever, the way that they're written is like if you have amass whatever, if you have two different types of amass, which we now have, amass orcs and amass the zombie army from War of the Spark, you don't get to like make a new zombie army or whatever if you already have an orc army. It just makes a new orc army. It just pumps up your orc army, rather.
Yeah, it just puts a 1/1 counter on it.
Yeah.
And that's another thing another hurdle that I had to jump was, okay, so like we can use color to make it so you can make a blue Pikmin army, a red Pikmin army, a white Pikmin army. And I actually had to change the keyword from amass because I was running out of real estate on the cards. So because I wanted these Pikmin armies to have the Phantom keyword, it was really difficult to like give the cards Phantom. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you like see the cards and see how like kind of scrunched they can get. So the tokens can't very easily like say the rules text on Phantom. So I have it called pluck in the game now instead of a mass. It is
Also thematic.
and also thematic. It's like and it also works somewhat differently than a mass because you get to distribute the counters across all armies. It's like there's a weird thing that happens, but the idea is that in my set, red, the red amass is common. It'll appear in every single color because the red Pikmin army is your basic army.
Yep.
The other colors have an additional ability keyword tag to them usually, so they're uncommon and greater. That said, that means that there's going to be like 3 times as many cards that say pluck a red Pikmin army. So I had to make it so that, well, if these ones are going to be rare, that means it's going to be harder to put 1/1 counters on them. So I had to change the mechanic in pluck so that if you already have a Pikmin army of that color on the field, you can instead distribute the 1/1 counters as you see fit among your armies. So if you have a red Pikmin army that's a 1/1, and you have a blue Pikmin army that's a 2/2, and you pluck red 5, you actually could put all 5 of those 1/1 counters on the blue army, right? Because the idea in lore in the games is that once you've unlocked the new color, you can kind of always get them now instead of the other color. So there was a bunch of weird little hurdles like that I had to jump, right? And like I said, the way that I solved that problem was by looking at what Wizards has already done, what other people have already done, how the rules of the game actually work. And beyond that, after I think the first iteration of the game, I ended up talking to a level 2 judge, I think, that was interested in this because they also do custom stuff. They have their own custom Pokemon stuff. And I ran through every single card that I built through them. And they were like, okay, that can't work that way. That doesn't work with the rules of Magic the Gathering. This can't work that way. Here's how that would probably have to work. So not only did I just go haha, I make Magic card, I actually reached out and put them through a primary source for how rules work and had them tell me yes or no on certain things. So there's an amount of doing your due diligence, and when it comes to creating a card, let's say we have all of that down. How do you make an actual card that someone wants to play? So my philosophy was to make this a standard legal power level set, right? This isn't on the level of Modern Masters or Modern Horizons, obviously. This wasn't a made for Commander set either. This was, I want people to, if they draft this, feel like they're playing a modern standard set. So, I just look at the power level of commons and uncommons in, modern standard, right? We look at right now you'd look at frontiers or whatever, and foundations, and be like, okay, well, I want to make a common creature that's 3 mana, right? What would that look like? Not just go, well, I want this to be a 5/5 with trample for 3 mana or something like that, right? It's you actually have to put some amount of thought into it. And the best way to do that is just to look at what's already been done, to give yourself an amount of credibility, look at what people have already done, the actual developers of the game have already done, and base it off of that. Obviously, there's going to be some weird stuff because upper rares and mythics, the whole point of them is that they kind of break the rules a lot more than usual. But even then, that's where the next step comes in, which is just playtesting, right? A great asset for people that are trying to mess with custom Magic stuff and want to actually playtest this stuff is obviously, you could print them off and slide them as proxies in front of your cards. But a really easy way is if you have or want to get, because it's only $15 or less on Steam, Tabletop Simulator. You can take the PNGs of your custom Magic cards and load them into Tabletop Simulator and have a digitally accessible version of your custom set. I did probably 4 or 5 playtests of my Pikmin set in Tabletop Sim before I ever did them in physical to make sure that they worked even somewhat correctly. And I had a lot of fun doing it. The people that drafted it, and made stuff with it had a lot of fun as well. yeah, that's just like tabletop sim is like the hub of if you're trying to do any indie board game, if you're trying to do
I know like
anything.
tabletop sim is extremely popular amongst board game designers and similar too.
Mhm.
So people can not have to get together to actually test something.
Exactly. But yeah, like that's the big one. And then when it came to like printing it all out, I ended up printing on like using like makeplayingcards.com. Technically, they don't print any Magic the Gathering cards because that would be, I think, copyright. But if I change the frames, which I totally do, change the frames so that they're not Magic the Gathering and don't have any Magic copyright, I print them on Make Playing Cards. Because it's really easy. It comes very quickly. It doesn't cost that much considering, but if you're trying to do something like me and print an entire draft set, that's like $300. But if you're just like, I want a commander deck that's 100 cards, it's like 12. It's not that expensive. Yeah, it's a really good tool for that kind of stuff.
Definitely. So that's the type of thing you're doing when you're making a custom set. You got to decide about like your theme, like you wanted Pikmin. You have to figure out what some of your mechanics are going to be for you. Kind of the core mechanic. Obviously, there's other mechanics too, but kind of the core mechanic that a lot of it is built around is the pluck mechanic, which is very thematic, very, very interesting. And then, yeah, you also have to figure out how you're actually going to play it, how you're actually going to play test it. Was there anything during play testing, a bit more general, maybe not like super specific, that came up that kind of surprised you that, that's the important of play testing, right? You just have a set. You're like, cool, yeah. I'm off to the races. And then you play it and you're like, oh, brother, this is actually miserable or something. Did anything like that happen to you? You got to look out for that.
There's a big one. And it's rough because it was known from like the first time we play tested. And I have been trying to fix it since. And I think I have it now. After 5 revisions to one card. That is a common.
Yeah, you got to look out for those comments.
I made a 2-drop 2/2 that had the Squadron Hawk ability, where you would, if you're unfamiliar, it's when this creature enters the battlefield, you may look through your library for up to 3 other cards named the same name as this card, reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle your deck. So you just always can have access to 4 of them if you get one of them. And its secondary ability was the first time any player plucks each turn, each of your opponents lose 1 life, you gain 1 life. And so the first thing that came up was, oh man, this thing's at 2/2. It's also pushing in for damage while it's damaging opponents, right? Because your opponents are taking 1 damage whenever anyone plucks the first time each turn, right? So like you pluck, your opponent plucks, they lose 2, you gain 2. You attack for 2.
That could get out of hand quite quickly.
It's out of hand real quick. Not to mention the fact that you have 3 more in your hand, right? Now you're lightning helixing your opponent every time if you have 3 of them on the field. So that was huge. Okay, so I was like, all right, well, let's make it, I think it cost it cost 2. It was a 2/2. I was like, all right, let's make it a 1/2, right? Still too much. And that was like after a full print run. Then the next print run, it was like, all right, well, let's bring it down to like a 0/1. And it's still too good. So the latest iteration is it only triggers the ability to leech when you pluck for the first time on each of your own turns. So it only triggers once at sorcery speed, more or less.
Yeah.
Each go around, and it's a 0/1 for 2, because like everyone was always just because the biggest issue with it is the Squadron Hawk ability.
Yes,
and I don't want to lose that because I think it's fun. Because it's a little swarm of these guys. That's the whole point. Is there are a bunch of these little dudes.
I was going to say, I assume it's relatively thematic.
Yeah. And it's funny because there's another common in the set that has a Squadron Hawk ability. Not a problem at all, because it costs a green for a little 1/1 that has the Squadron Hawk ability, and when it dies, you gain a life. That's it. Right? So it's
Yeah,
another kind of
nothing
goofy,
to write home
little
about at
dude.
all.
And just fine, it's fine. It doesn't need any changes. But that freaking thing that leeches, holy crud. So yeah, and that's something that like I'm glad that I have the playtesting, because
on paper you're like, oh yeah, I bet that. I mean, it'll probably be strong, but it'll probably be a little strong. But I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Or what's the worst that could happen? Oh, it simply single-handedly defines every single game that it resolves in. Cool.
Neat.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and that's a fun aspect of game design in general, not just for, making your own custom Magic set, but I'm sure for actual WotC, the design team making new sets, playtesting them with each other, and, board games, playtesting mechanics, is that you hit stuff where it's just like, whoa, gotta rein that in.
Whoopsie.
Uh-oh. Yeah. So it's just like a fun little puzzle, in my opinion. I love stuff like that.
Yep. And I think that's one of the very fun things about specifically like the creative things that game design offers to someone is like, it is inherently a creative act. This kind of design. And I think this is a lot of the appeal that Commander and also Cube has on a smaller level. 'Cause like you get to say, here is my thing I have made. And then you get to like put it into action. And then you get to see very really if it if it meets your goals or not. And then unlike a lot of other creative aspects, like say writing a piece and then putting it out into the world, whether that be a book, an article or whatever, it can be kind of hard to then just be like, interesting, I'm going to modify this and put it out again.
Right. Yeah. No,
game design,
the best
very
you get is an editor.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But like game design has you do get to do a lot of like, all right, I'm going to put this out into the world a little bit and I'm going to get people to try it and they're going to give me some feedback, or I'm going to see how things go with it. And then I'm going to go back to the drawing board and do it again. I think that's a very interesting thing.
It's very permutative. There's a lot of bouncing back and forth that happens.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to make your favorite game your own, a great way you can do that, if that game is Magic the Gathering, is go past Commander. Go past making a cube. Try making your own set. Build out your own custom set with custom cards. Who knows what'll happen? You could be like Zeb and make an incredible Pikmin set. Or you could be like me and fail. I've never actually tried. I just assume I would fail. Zeb.
I was about to say, you never talked to me about this.
Zeb, I know there was kind of a second half of this that you wanted to talk about, going past Magic the Gathering.
Yes, there are many things that people love, many hobbies that we enjoy that are also wonderful places to make your own. And again, yes, this is something beyond Magic the Gathering, something that both Cal and I both do in our spare time. Is play video games, right? There's a lot of people that do hobby stuff that play video games. And there's a lot of cool stuff in the video game realm for making your own, which you wouldn't think, right? Because you go, okay, well, there's like emulation. I guess I could download games that I technically
I guess I could play more games.
Right. Like, is that it? Well, it's like, oh, yes. But there's also something that plenty of you have probably already heard of or I've played some of. They're called mods, right? Modding is an excellent way to make a video game your own. So someone could take Skyrim, and put, I don't know, Thomas the Tank Engine in the game instead of Alduin, the dragon. So the opening has Thomas falling from the sky, going toot toot and blowing up this town or something, But mods go beyond just like making an aesthetic difference. You can have a mod that goes, I don't like how spells work in Skyrim. I'm going to download this mod that totally revamps how spells work to make it so that I can craft my own spells really powerfully and stuff like that. And there's an entire world of people that learn how to make these, load them onto freeware sites so that you can download them, apply them to your game, do that kind of stuff. I've personally never made any mods myself. I know a couple of people that have. But like, again, you don't have to necessarily be the person that makes these things to enjoy them, to understand that there's more ways to get into a game than that. which kind of also ties into something that I really want the make your own aspect of any hobby, is that like these are great ways for people that are already entrenched to make them new and fresh for themselves, as well as make them very approachable for newer players. So a great example of this, in my opinion at least, is what are called randomizers. So a randomizer, there's a couple different ways that it can be applied to something, usually a video game, where you take some aspect of that video game that is more or less set in stone in the way that the game is played, and you randomize it. So a great example, and one that I love and do very often, is Legend of Zelda. In the Legend of Zelda games, it's usually like a very set path that you have to take. It's like, oh, I've got to go to this dungeon because that's where I get the boomerang. The boomerang allows me to hit this kind of a key that allows me to go to the next dungeon that unlocks the next key item, like, fire arrows that allow me to burn this thing down to go through the next area. What randomizers do for the Zelda games are going to be something along the lines of, okay, well, all of those items that you find in those dungeons, we're totally randomizing where they show up in the game now. So instead of going, I need to go to dungeon A to complete the game so I can get to dungeon B, it's, I need to find these items. I don't know where they are, so I'm just going to go looking. And then whatever items you find, you go, oh, well, I found the fire arrows really early. That means I can do dungeon C. Okay.
Really early, yeah.
Really early. And then you go into dungeon
And
C.
then at the end of dungeon C, you're like, oh, the boomerang. I can go into what is normally the first dungeon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun because like every different randomized run you do is randomized. They're going to be different. They're going to be new and interesting. And where this can come in for newer players is it brings some attention back to older games, such as Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, or the original Legend of Zelda on the NES. There's randomizers for that. There's randomizers for A Link to the Past, right? And these players will go, these gamers, these people that are interested will go, that's really freaking cool. I need to check this game out so that I can do that too, right? Not just jump into the randomizer, probably, unless they're crazy. If you are crazy like that, that's no shade on you. Go for it, man. I'm not gonna judge that. But like, it makes people go like, I want to do stuff like that, and those are the games that have them, so I'm going to play those games. And so we've got kids that are in their teens, that have never touched an actual NES or Super Nintendo, playing randomizers of these on emulators. And one of the gateways to that is something that I love watching when it comes up every year is the GDQs, or Games Done Quicks. And that's where it's usually some kind of fundraiser, for charity, where they'll bring in speedrunners and stuff like that. So people that more or less semi-pro or professionally speedrun video games, and they'll just, do that. They'll speedrun their video games, whatever. But sometimes they'll also do the randomizers. And that's kind of where I got into it, because I realized, oh yeah, Super Metroid has a randomizer. I want to mess with that. That's really cool. It's one of my favorite games. I'll come back to it. By that same vein, I literally just said another thing that is how you make a game fun for you. And this one doesn't even require modification to the game at all. Speedrunning. So a speedrun is just playing a game as absolutely fast as you possibly can to get the fastest time at completing that game. And there's all kinds of ways you can do it. Like for Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, there's, I'm going to see how fast I can beat all of the dungeons, get to the final boss, and beat the game. Or you can, in the very first dungeon, find a very specific wall, do a backflip at a very specific angle through that wall, fall through the floor in such a way that the game goes, where are you supposed to be? And then it stack overflows and puts you at the very end of the game. And you win. That technically is a speed run, right? And that takes under 5 minutes, So I speed run Metroid Dread. And I don't have a very phenomenal time. Back when it first came out, I breached like top 200-ish, though I never posted to any boards. But it was so much fun because you just like get into kind of like this like groove of just like, here's this really weird thing that you wouldn't normally think to do in this video game. And I just shot through a wall with a plasma beam and just get to go do things way before you're supposed to. Like for someone that's very technical about stuff like this, as I am, like loves like understanding the way things work in like video games and stuff like that. It's awesome because you're literally abusing these holes in the code that allow you to do weird stuff. And so like if you play through casually, you're not gonna see these. But if you want to, there's this whole like rabbit hole that you can fall down and how to like just like do crazy things in any game, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing. Like the video game scene has seen a really big explosion of this. Like speedrunning, like you said, I think is the really obvious one. But I think the randomizers stuff, or stuff like in the Pokemon community, people come up with like more and more complicated ways of doing Nuzlocke randomizer runs. If you're any of your Pokemon fan, you have to delete your save, and so many ways to modify video games to our will. Speedrunning, I think, is the really cool one. I enjoy a lot of things about speedrunning. The glitch hunting, all the different constraints that people have on different games, different categories, all these different ways you can twist and modify these things to your will. I think randomizers are the things that are randomizers, mods. Like mods, I think are kind of almost the equivalent of maybe like speed running is like the equivalent of competitive Magic. There's competitive entirely. Gaming to fill that niche, but mods,
obviously you can play Street Fighter competitively, but like, but that's playing the game as meant to be played, right?
Yes, I think that like mods maybe are the easiest equivalent of like actually fully making your favorite game your own. You're like, oh yes, I'm not happy with the way that this system works. I will overhaul it. I would like to add a bunch of new content directly to this game that I really enjoy. All of those things are really interesting. Speedrunning is the main one you dabble in, right? And randomizers some?
Yeah, and I've started getting into randomizers a bit more. So speedrunning, I've been able, like, I've speedrun like Metroid Dread, Metroid Zero Mission. I speedran Resident Evil 2 Remake and 3 Remake a bit. But like those are the main ones. And even then, like I said, I never hit any of the charts. I just like did it as a hobby just because it was fun, right? But yeah, those are the and then the randomizers I've just started getting into. So we've got like literally any of the Legend of Zelda's pre Breath of the Wild and any of the Metroids, like literally like any of the Metroid games are randomizer capable, right? So yeah, I've been messing with a lot of those recently. They're a lot of fun.
Well, Zeb, we're running a little low on time, so I suppose I have one more question for you. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the Herald's Horn audience with before we go?
If you want to do pinball emulation, you can literally, with a thing called VPX, emulate pinball machines, right? You need to have a big flat screen and another flat screen to be like, to make a pinball machine for yourself. Or you can just emulate them on your computer. There's a whole bunch of stuff for that. Just look up VPX pinball, right? Batocera, BATOCERA. If you would like to try to dabble in making your own game station that will have just like emulated games, whatever the hell on it, so that you can play your own at any time, I would highly suggest that, because not only can you play older console games, like even on the NES, Sega Genesis, all that fun stuff, you can also get arcade games. And so there's so many wonderful games out there that are, made in the last 20, 30 years that are just out there. You have to have the game, have purchased the copy of the game at some point. So make sure you do that. But the emulators, I can tell you how to get and where to get them. Other than that, you'll find me playing games on Playing with Power. And come to Magic Cons so that you can play Pikmin with me. Perfect.
Well, Zeb, thank you so much for coming on the Herald's Horn.
Anytime, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have feedback, would like to sponsor us, or would like to submit something to the Letters to the Editor segment, email me at editorial@haroldtorn.com. The show is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Cal Jones. The rest of the team is, of course, our co-hosts, Emma Partlow, Dan, better known as Moderately Anonymous MTG, and Lexi, better known as Black Girl Mage. We're having so much fun making this show. I hope you're enjoying listening to it. We'll see you next week.